My name is Carol Chukliangi. I am a Catholic mother of 6 children, 5 boys and 1 girl, and 7 beautiful grandchildren. I am a convert to Catholicism, and recently in my life, I've just really been feeling God's calling to share my conversion story with all of you. So I'm going to go back to the beginning and share a little bit about my childhood. So I grew up never really going to church. Maybe I can probably count on one hand the number of times I went to church growing up. We would go once in a while to a Presbyterian church. I went to a preschool and a Lutheran church, so I think we went to church there once or twice on a holiday. But needless to say, I did not know Jesus. My father had grown up on a dairy farm, and they were kind of like your staunch, farmers, hardworking, didn't really use words of affirmation, didn't say I love you or hug each other. It was kind of a cold environment, I guess you can say. My dad enlisted in the military when he was just 17 and left the dairy farm. And so they never really had words of affirmation for me growing up or said, I love you. And I'm not putting my parents down. They did the best with what they had and what they had grown up with. But at 16, I remember my father saying to me that he was an atheist. And it was kind of like a really bad time to tell a young girl that there was basically he kind of cut me loose and let me feel like there was no moral compass and really no rules, and I just needed to kind of go about my life pleasing myself, I guess you can say. And so I was so lost back then. I think that I was just really looking for love in all the wrong places, right? So about that time, somewhere around my 16th birthday, I met a young man who was also from a broken home. His mother was in her 3rd or 4th marriage. His father was not really in his life. He was working for the government and traveled overseas a lot and really just wasn't around. This young man and I entered into an intimate relationship, and pretty soon after that I found out I was pregnant. This young man had developed some pretty unusual ideas about relationships, and he really didn't believe in monogamy. I mean, I think because of seeing his mother go through several relationships and them not ever working out, that he just was resigning himself to the fact that it was an outdated concept. I remember a specific conversation about the Bible that he and I had where he was saying things like, yeah, it was a good book probably 2,000 years ago, but we've really evolved since then, and we can make up our own, we can think for ourselves. And so he was basically saying that he didn't believe in monogamy. He didn't think that it was really outdated and that he didn't think it would work. And so he just wasn't going to commit to something he thought would never work. So I guess you can say he had me a little bit brainwashed. And there's a saying that says, if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. And that's kind of where I was. I was really ready to be, I was not in a good place. So I think I convinced him to marry me because I thought it would change him, right? Responsibility, having a family, all that stuff. I really had my hopes that he would grow up and want the same things I did, as so many young girls do, but unfortunately that doesn't happen too often. And so we were married outside of any church. We were married civilly by a justice of the peace. And we had our one child, a boy. And then not too long after we were married, I was pregnant with our 2nd child and had a beautiful baby girl. And my husband continued to have lots of other relationships, openly telling me about them like it was no big deal. At some point, he was found out to have had a relationship with someone, a young girl that was very young, underage, and he was court-ordered into counseling. And so I was in the counseling with him, and he stayed in that counseling for the mandated amount of time. But when that mandate was over, he was done. He wasn't really getting anything from it. The one who grew the most in that counseling was myself. And I wanted God's blessings on my life. I did believe in God. And I told him that I wanted to change. I wanted our life to be different. And I wanted him to go to counseling with me as a couple. And he agreed at first, but then when it came time, he just didn't show up. And he said, I'm not going. And so I knew that that was it for me, and that I needed to, I needed my life to be better. And I told him that if he wasn't going to go to counseling, that we would need a separation. So very quickly after that, he had one of his girlfriends come to the house, helped him pack up his things, and he walked out on me and the two kids. And I can really say, never looked back. He tried to have control over me by telling me that if I went and got the child support court ordered, I'd never see any of it. And that's basically what happened. I got the court order involved for child support, and he took off, and I believed he was living under an alias name in another state. So he never had a relationship with his children again. But at that time, I was so scared. I was terrified. I was a young 20-year-old girl, 20-something, and he had left us. And I had no idea how I was going to support us, if I could support us. I didn't know I had it in me. I was terrified. And so I remember doing a lot of inner reflection. And one day, it was a turning point for me. This was a really pivotal moment in my life. I had a dog that we had had together, and I was alone with my dog, and I walked up into the woods behind this house that we had rented, and I looked up to the heavens, and I said, God, if this Jesus person is somebody that I need to know, please show me. And I was honestly seeking the truth. You know, I wanted my children's lives to be better than mine. I wanted more for them. So you can say that I came to Christ for my children, and I was terrified. And God used that moment in my life to really get to me, you know, to get to my heart and to give me an opportunity to come to him. And so because I was searching the truth, which I later learned in the Bible, it says, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open to you. And I never knew that before, but that's exactly what I did. Nobody was pushing me. Nobody was coercing me. I wanted to know the truth. And so all of my searching led me to Christ. So about a week after that prayer that I said, that conversation with God out in the woods, I was at work, and a man walked into my workplace and put a Bible down on the counter and said, you know, started ministering to everybody in the room who would listen. And I knew God had sent that man there for me, and probably for the other people, but I knew that I needed to hear what he had to say. So I got to know the gentleman, and we ended up going to a Baptist church in a couple of days later here in my town. And you know what? I knew right away that that wasn't where God had called me. And so I began searching different denominations. I went to different churches. I even went to a Buddhist temple, not knowing it wasn't of Jesus. I can remember those chants where I didn't even know what I was saying, and thinking that what got me out of there was like, gosh, I don't even know what I'm saying. I could be worshiping Satan for all I know. And so I didn't go back. Then another pivotal moment happened in my life. In walks Franco Chukwuliangi, who would become my husband and my soulmate. And he was so handsome, a true gentleman from Ecuador, first generation here, very patient, from a big Catholic family in Ecuador, and 13 children in his family, same father, same mother. He and I began dating. At first it was friendship, and then very quickly we got intimate, like so many people do nowadays. And so I had no intentions of getting married again. I knew where that had led me before, and I wasn't even entertaining that idea. But a few months in, he asked me if I wanted to go to church with him. And we went to St. Bernadette's Catholic Church in Springfield. And I'm going to tell you that when I very first attended my first Mass at St. Bernadette's, I knew right away that that's what was my home, that God had called me there. And the words the priest spoke, truth is a universal language, and I just knew it. I knew that he was speaking truth. And there were a lot of things I had not heard before, but it was very intriguing to me, and I wanted more. I couldn't get enough. And so I entered into the RCIA program, which is a program for adults who are looking into the faith. So anywhere you are, you should have a Catholic church down the street that starts an RCIA program in the fall. And classes usually run all winter long, and they lead up to Easter Sunday. And Easter Sunday, if you are ready, that is when you can receive your sacraments of confession, first confession, and the Eucharist and confirmation. So I began that process. It was a 9-month process. I learned and learned and learned so much. And as we were getting a little closer to Easter Sunday, I remember getting that typical cold feet, right? I was just a little scared. What if I'm not meant to be Catholic? What if, all these what ifs? What if I'm only doing this because I think I'm going to marry this guy, So I called my sponsor, and because everybody has a sponsor when you're going through the RCIA program. And I went to her condo in Alexandria, and we sat and we talked, and mostly I talked, and I had so many questions and thoughts, and I just needed them to all come spilling out. And all of a sudden it was like God just said, I have called you. All you have to do is say yes and trust me. And so I jumped up out of my chair, and I was so grateful for her taking the time for me. And she hardly said a word. And I'm going to tell you that if you're Catholic and you have thought about being a sponsor in the RCIA, just do it. You don't have to have all the answers. It was just that she was there for me. And I've lost touch with that sponsor from way back. Maybe it's almost 30 years ago now, maybe 30 years ago. And I need to find her. She was a wonderful friend to me, and I'm looking for her. So anyway, the night of the Easter Vigil, which is the night before Easter, the church was all decked out in flowers and candles, and they have the baptismal pool there. And I remember walking in that night and just being so taken back by the beauty and knowing what was about to happen in my life, that it was a true miracle. And so my parents were there. My parents came and observed me becoming Catholic. And it was just such a beautiful night. I still get chills thinking about it. And I'm going to tell you that I know that the angels were rejoicing that night, because several of us were one for Christ. And so a short time later, a few weeks later maybe, I kept feeling this nagging feeling that God wanted more from me, from us, from Franco and I. And so I told him that I felt like we needed to stop having the type of relationship that we were having, and to abstain until we were married. And so I think that was at that point we were already engaged, and he was very respectful of that, and he loved me for that, because I wanted God's blessings on my life, and he wanted God's blessings on his life. And so he agreed with me, and we proceeded to wait. And I had started the process of getting an annulment from my prior marriage in the church. And it was a pretty long wait. And I didn't understand why it was such a long wait at the time. And it's not always that long of a wait. Normally, it could take a few months to a year. In my case, it was 3 years. And God just really used that time for us to get to know each other, to know, to show God that he was first for us, that nothing else was important as him in our lives. And so what I want you to understand is, even if you have already entered into a sexual relationship, you can change that. You don't have to continue doing what you're doing. You deserve all of God's blessings on your life. And you don't need to settle for second best. And if that boy or girl won't agree with you and take those steps to change things, to have God's blessings, then they're not the one for you. And you just have to have that kind of courage and trust. So finally, the day came, my annulment came through, and we planned our date for our wedding. It was August 21st, 1993. And while we were waiting, was such a beautiful time. But that day of our wedding, that night of our wedding, it was just such an amazing thing. And people told us later, wow, that was so romantic. Why was your wedding so romantic? Why was it so different? And see, we knew because we had done what we needed to do. And we were already feeling like God was showering blessings down on us. And so here we are, almost 30 years later. And I'm going to tell you, you know what? I might not have been a true virgin that night, but I really felt like I was. And you can have that second virginity. You can rededicate your life to Jesus and to do what God is asking you to do. And you can have your cake and eat it too. So don't feel like you got to settle and just stay in the place that you are. You can make things happen, and you can ask for God's blessings no matter where you are in your life. So here we are 30 years later. We, like I said, have wonderful 6 children and 7 grandchildren. And I have to tell you that I know that God is still showering blessings down on us from those things that we did 30 years ago. You know, think about God and time. Time is like a second for God. 30 years is like a millisecond in God's hands. And so he is still giving us his blessings today from those things that happened way back when. And I'm here to tell you that it is so worth it. And all you have to do is ask Jesus. Ask for his guidance. Ask for him to come into your heart. Go find an RCIA program in your community and start learning. You're not committing to anything yet just because you sign up for the program. You're committing to seek the truth. And I'm going to tell you that the Catholic Church is the first and original Christian church. Jesus gave Peter the keys to the kingdom, and he was the first pope of the Catholic Church. And something I've learned more recently when I began praying about this journey, that God was asking me to share my conversion story, I prayed for God's discernment. And the thing that he began to show me was that he wanted me to promote the faith, the church, the original Catholic Church. And one of the things that he has shown me in the last few months very clearly, I'm a part of some groups on Facebook. One of them is called Catholic Converts. I love the conversations that happen on that group. If you're not on it, you should join it. And they ask all kinds of questions and share all kinds of great stuff. And one of the things that my eyes were open to just this year is how badly things changed when Martin Luther started to take people away from the church. And I didn't understand, I kind of thought, well, other Christians just have a different way to celebrate Christ. And while that might be true, the truth is that Martin Luther specifically, purposefully left out books of the Bible that are real and true. The book of Maccabees, do your research. You'll see the truth. That he left out things because of his own desires and wants to change things the way that he wanted them, not necessarily what God had given us. So all I'm going to say is search for the truth by looking and searching about the truth of the church. There's a great book called Rome Sweet Home by Scott Hahn. It's been a wonderful gift to me in my life. It was written by Scott Hahn, who was a Protestant minister who set out to disprove the Catholic faith. And what happened? He ended up getting converted in the end. And so you can do the same thing. You can search out the truth. And my prayer for you is that you seek honestly with an open heart. Don't just go to a church and say, oh, this feels good. Because here's the thing. It might feel good, but pedophiles do that. They just want to find something that feels good. The real church is about the Eucharist. Jesus died for us, and he never lied to us. And he said, "This is my body and my blood." It is the body and blood of Jesus. So do your homework, do your research, search out the truth. Please message me if you need support or have any questions. I'm here for you guys. Thank you, and God bless you.